So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Rachel Edgell, and I am joined by my colleague, Ted Murguia. I'm based in our London office, and Ted is in San Clemente, so he's on the West Coast, if anyone else is same time zone as Ted. We are both college counselors, and we work with students on lots of different things, but one of the big things that we work on is essays. And you're all here because you would like a bit of advice or guidance on the Why Us essay, which is probably one of the more common supplemental essays that I think we see in addition to the personal statement. So it's a big one and it's important. It gives universities sort of a chance to see whether you'd be a good fit for them, and I think equally whether they'd be a good fit for you. So it's really quite an important essay, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so we've got the next half hour, 45 minutes or so to dedicate to giving you all of the best advice that we can after sort of years of working on these with students. So if you do have questions at any point, there's a Q&A feature. If you sort of hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see the Q&A feature. You can ask questions there. You can do so anonymously as well if you prefer. And Ted and I will keep an eye on the Q&A throughout our conversation and try to answer your questions as we go, or we might also save a bit of time at the end if anyone has questions that they didn't get a chance to ask. So I think that's probably it for housekeeping, and we can jump right in.
That sounds great. Well, let's get started because the question takes on many forms, right? I have three that I'll just read to you off the top of my head here. Stanford's really straightforward, and so is Columbia. Columbia simply says, why are you interested in attending Columbia University? 200 words, super straightforward. Stanford's a little more clever, but still straightforward. Name one thing you are looking forward to experiencing at Stanford. And they're limiting you somewhat, but it's the same kind of question. Penn is another one that I picked out just because it's a little it's wordy. It says, at Penn, learning and growth happen outside of the classroom too. How will you explore the community at Penn? Consider how this community will help you shape your perspective and identity, and how your identity and perspective will help shape this community. So it's long, but they're really asking you exactly what Rachel was saying. Is like, why do we fit with you and why do you fit with us? And I think that's a really key thing. But I wanted to do is do a quick poll, and I'm going to pick on Stanford because it's entertaining to pick on them. And let me share my screen. There you go. So first thing, and a lot of schools do this, laid with a really pretty picture, right? This is the beautiful Stanford campus. Oh my gosh. And then Columbia says the name is Columbia University in the city of New York. And when they're talking about Columbia, they're talking about campus in the city, right? So let me do a quick poll. Let me unshare here. And I'm actually not going to use the poll tool, but just you guys write in chat sort of top 2 or 3 reasons why you would want to go to Stanford, off the top of your head, whatever comes to mind. And let me pull the chat up so I can also see what's going on with it. Anybody?
Yeah, so we'll give you give you a minute. So just exactly, thank you. I think Arhan's written something, so that's really helpful. Everybody else, if you want to just jot down a couple things that when you think Stanford, what makes Stanford so attractive, and we'll give you a little bit of time here, and then I'll share some things that I've heard from students in the past as well, because I think we're seeing some themes here. I know me personally, when I saw that homepage that Ted just showed, I thought, wow, what a beautiful campus. And that's definitely a reason that I would think, I might want to go to a university if you see the campus and it's just looks exactly like it, out of the brochure, and it's everything you kind of imagine. So I think that's another reason. I see in the chat we've got academics, reputation. I think that applies to a lot of students. When they think of Stanford, they think it's got excellent reputation and excellent academic offerings.
And Rachel, I can't see the responses, so we leave it to you to summarize some of the ones that come out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the gist of it. So we've got academics, we've got reputation, we've got the beautiful campus. So those are, I think, the most common reasons that people would cite for why they might be interested in Stanford initially.
That makes total sense, right? It's like, why do you want to go there? Because Stanford's really pretty. It's in California. The weather is awesome. It's just what a great place to go to school. And so what bugs me is that they lead with this marketing message, right? Columbia is all about, we're in New York, right? If you see on that page I showed you, if you click on the About Columbia button, you get a little video, most of which is how cool it is to have that campus in the city of New York. And I've actually heard from Columbia admissions officer. She said, I hate it when people lead with why I want to go to Columbia if they say, because it's in New York. There are a bunch of universities in New York. We mean, why us? And she was pretty indignant about it. And I'm thinking, well, then quit leading your marketing message, right? So this is the most time-consuming essay. It's because it takes a bunch of research. And I think the basic principle is to find something about the college that is unique to the college and uniquely matched to your proven interests.
Yeah, and I think, just to add on, so I think the problem with some of these answers that we initially want to give, that, Stanford or Columbia, they've got good academics, they're in an interesting location, beautiful campus, whatever. I think the problem there is that it's not unique, as Ted just said. And so there are a lot of universities that have beautiful campuses. And as Ted said, there's a lot of universities in New York City, and there's a lot of universities that have good academics. And it doesn't really answer that question of why Columbia or why Stanford, because you're sort of, oh, it's in New York. Well, that could equally apply to NYU or to Fordham or to any of the other universities in New York.
Exactly. And then the trick is that whatever it is that you like about the university, and by the way, all these things may be true. I do want to go to Stanford because it's a pretty campus. That's just not the answer we can put down. But the trick is, in the rest of that sentence, is find something that's unique to the college and uniquely matched to you. So, and we'll give you some ideas of how to look for that, but it really is finding that one thing that only the university has that you're interested in. And then the last part of that sentence is tricky too, because it's uniquely matched to your proven interests, right? So don't just say that you want to go study paleontology at Amherst, because yeah, they have a great paleontology department, but okay, if that's really your passion and you really want to do that, what have you done about it so far, right? So that's kind of the trick, is you need to find something unique to them, unique to you, match them up, and then show that you already showed that interest, right? And that's why it's most challenging.
Yeah, and so I think what we're going to try to do today is, that's our overall advice. So if you take away anything from this webinar, it's that your why us essay needs to have details that are unique to each university and that are also connected to your proven interests. So that's the main takeaway. Then what we hope to do with the rest of our time is give you some actionable items, some practical advice on, well, how do you find those details? Because as Ted was showing earlier, we've got these glossy marketing materials that actually show us sort of the things that we don't want to say, which is these true but relatively generic details about the university. So we're going to try to focus our efforts on how to actually do that research, how to find those details. And so as I said earlier, if you do have questions as we're going, please don't hesitate, put those in the Q&A. If you have specific questions, if you'd like to pick our brains a little bit, please do that, and we'll try to answer them either as we talk or later. But on to some advice now.
So I usually start with my students and saying, well, let's try your major first. And that can go a couple ways. I have one student right now that's interested in being a pediatric physical therapist. So that's a graduate program, but she was looking for something. Can I go straight from undergrad all the way through the program? Turns out that's really rare. I had no idea, but it turns out that most physical therapy is for the elderly, the disabled, or athletes. Okay, that makes sense. That's the biggest population. But so there, for her, it's going to be really easy to find a program where she can go and in, I think it's 6 years of college, come out a pediatric therapist. And her undergrad, she wants to have the ability to have an internship, preferably during school, where she could actually practice it. So that's one way to do it. If your major is fairly unique, then look for the major and then look at the program in detail. I think the error that most of my students make is they spend 5 minutes looking at the webpage and say, okay, yeah, that's what I want to study, and off we go. You got to go a lot deeper than that. Look at the faculty, look at the courses. I don't know, and Rachel, how do you start with your students?
Yeah, I think I do the same. And I would say that a lot of my students probably don't have these sort of niche majors, and that's perfectly fine. So a lot of my students want to study things like economics or psychology, and these programs that are really offered at most universities that we encounter. And that's perfectly fine. It does make it a little bit trickier in terms of finding those unique details about each university. So my sort of approach for that situation in particular is to maybe take a student's top 3 or top 5 universities and in a moment compare the departmental websites for economics or for psychology or for whatever their intended major is, and really compare them side by side at one time. And I think that helps sort of make those subtle differences stand out a little bit more. So for example, there's going to be a big difference between 2 universities' approach to economics. One university might focus more on behavioral economics, for example. And so that's what a student's sort of interest is within economics. That would be a really good detail that they could mention, and they could go a little bit further and they could find a specific professor who's done some research in behavioral economics, or find a specific class that they might want to take in behavioral economics. But that's how you can kind of find those details for these more popular majors that are going to be offered at every university. There will be subtle differences among the departments at the universities on a student's list. It just takes, I think, a little bit more digging to find what those differences actually are.
I agree. And the one that I've run into the most is the business major, which is one of the most popular majors. But digging into it, there are huge differences, whether or not they have an entrepreneurial bent to them, whether they have a social good policy to them, whether it's something simple as many business programs, you can't have an emphasis in marketing. You can do finance, you can do accounting. Turns out marketing's rarer than I expected. That's what I did. So I was like, of course everybody should have it, and they don't. So look for that one level deeper if you're in particular in business. If you're interested in real estate, that's not that common. The most common ones are really finance, and entrepreneurship goes back and forth. And socially responsible finance is coming up more, but that's also, if that's something that you're interested in, and of course you've shown some sort of social responsibility, that's a great angle to take, because not a lot of places have that kind of program.
Exactly.
And, going down that path a little bit, the other thing, even if you have a common major, you can also look for crossover programs. The best example I've seen, and it's actually a really tough program to get into, but Brown University and RISD have a joint program. Actually apply to both schools, and then some of the majors, I just pulled a few of them off. It was apparel design and environmental studies. You do environmental studies at Brown and apparel design at RISD. You can do furniture design and mechanical engineering. What a great combination. Printmaking and international relations. So all these it is very unique, and Brown has this the open curriculum principle where you can really build your major, right? And they're very proud of it. So really, actually, I think the Brown University supplemental question says, how are you going to take advantage of the open curriculum? But look for in every department will have some sort of cross-discipline kind of thing that's great, that could be, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to do. Or you might be discovering it for the first time, and then you can tell them that. You say, I've had this interest, these are the two interests that I've had, and you are the only place I found where you have those two interests combined. So I usually ask my students to look not only at their major, but minors, and hey, what other courses would you like to take, because it sounds interesting. I have one student at Davis right now who's taking the enology course. He just wanted to do that for fun and learn about wine and learn about wine tasting, and turns out that's a really good reason to go to Davis.
Yeah, and I think a lot of universities have questions that are like that, and so it's actually really important to pay quite close attention, I think, to the wording of the why us prompt, and make sure that you are answering the question directly, and also, you know, answering it sufficiently. So just as an example, sort of in comparison, we've got Brown where it's asking, you know, how will you take advantage of this open curriculum? And I think a similar but different question would be at Cornell, where they ask you, what are the areas of study that you want to explore? And so there's a couple ways that you can think about this. You can talk about the areas that you are already familiar with and you want to go a bit deeper in at Cornell, or you can talk about areas that you haven't had a chance to discover yet that you want to explore when you get there. And there's no right or, you know, sort of wrong way to approach that question, as long as you are answering the prompt. And I think that's another, you know, sort of thing just to be careful, be mindful of. But at the end of the day, it's still sort of asking you the same sort of questions about what might you major in, what might you minor in, are you interested in doing some sort of double major, and just really thinking about what does that look like at this unique sort of university situation.
And that's really a good strategy for everything. As soon as you start combining things get unique really fast. I had a student who his personal statement was all about food. And so he, you know, demonstrated an interest in food, etc. He almost took a gap year to go to France to study culinary arts. But then in his essays, why do you want to go here? That's one of the things he was looking for. He didn't want to become a cook. He just likes it, right? And so he was, well, I really want to major in economics, but you uniquely also give me the opportunity to explore my other passion. And his whole personal statement was about his other passion. So that actually worked out really well in terms of having some evidence that this was unique. And then, yeah, culinary arts is not a popular or a major that's available at many universities. That made it very unique, actually. So that worked well. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that sort of relates to, you know, he had this very easily proven interest, that he was interested in these, you know, culinary arts, and he had written about it in his personal statement. I think that just reminded me of IB students, for example, who write an extended essay on a topic, or students here in the UK write sometimes an EPQ on a topic as well. And I think that can be another sort of proven interest that you can then find that connection, that detail at a university, and sort of make that connection. So one example is research and faculty and what the faculty at a university are doing. So I think, Ted, you've had a lot of experience with this. So if you want to maybe go into this a little bit more, what that would look like.
You reminded me, I had a student from Stanford call me up, and she wanted to interview me because I grew up in Mexico, and she was doing a paper on Latin American culture in immigrant America. And she told me her story. And basically for her, what had happened is she started this work and she wrote a paper in high school about immigrant culture in the US. And she had referenced in that a book. And then it turns out that the author of the book was a professor at Stanford. So when she wrote her Stanford essay, she said, this is what I want to do. Look, here's my paper. And when she interviewed me, she was actually taking the class from the professor, and she was very, very excited that she got to do that. So, but I think the principle applies, right? If you've done any research and you're interested in, go look at the website, look at the faculty and click on them and see what kind of work they're doing. sometimes you'll just run into something fascinating that they're doing. They do a lot of weird things too. And it's like, really, somebody's paying you to do that kind of work? But this is really time consuming, because usually when you go into the department and you start clicking on the faculty, you got to go one by one and read their bio and and a paragraph, and that just takes time. So commit yourself to, okay, I'm a lot of the time is going to feel wasted just because you click and, okay, that was silly. That was silly. Why am I looking at this? And you're really looking for the needle in the haystack. And there's a lot of hay you got to get to get there. But I do encourage you to do that work, because when you do find the needle, it's awesome.
Exactly. And if it helps, sometimes I tell my students to just set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes and start going down a rabbit hole basically on the website and looking for these details. And then at the end of 20 minutes, just have a break and do it again the next day or in a couple of days. And so that way you don't feel, I think sometimes if you sit there for 2 hours on the website and so on, it can kind of all blend together and you don't, you lose track of what you're trying to do. So if it helps to kind of chunk it into smaller pieces, that's something that sometimes I tell my students to do. And just, each time that you do that, focus on a different area. So maybe start with your major, like we talked about earlier, and then another time you can start looking at faculty and just try to, break it up, because it does take a lot of work. It is a lot of research. And it's something that you do really, as a student, you have to do it yourself, because even Ted and I, we know our students really well and we can offer some suggestions, but at the end of the day, I don't know for sure what they're going to like and what they're not going to like until they sort of tell me. So it is just a lot of work, which is why it's good to, start thinking about it now, start planning it now, start doing it now.
Yeah, exactly. It takes time. Well, so far we've talked about, look at your major, look at your areas of study. So that's all the academics, and go and do that. And then take that even further. Maybe you want to do research, look at the faculty and see what you'd like to do with that. Another way you could take after that is to connect the university to your passion. So the culinary arts is one example. I had a student that wanted to, and this is the time where you can mention location. He wanted to study environmental studies, environmental science. And it turns out that Michigan, the University of Michigan, has one of the richest and most diverse set of ecosystems within 10 miles of the campus. And I had no idea. He was just looking around it and he figured this out. And it was like, wow, what a great reason to go to Michigan, because then he could talk about, here's what I want to study. And not only that, Michigan uniquely gives me the opportunity to have a practical application of things that I want to study, because no one else has a campus like that or is near an environment like that. And so that worked out really, really well. Maybe it's also, if you have done a lot of community service and you have a very public policy kind of thing, Stanford has, it's the Haas Center for Public Service, and they've focused everything around, everything that Stanford does that's community based is through Haas, and they're creating these, they want to make every single course at Stanford be a cardinal course, which means that it has a significant component that's aimed at some sort of community or public service. So that's something where you can pick on something that the school is very proud of. And if you've done public service, you can say, you guys are perfect. You have the kind of program where I want to take these cardinal courses, because that's, again, a practical application of, okay, if you're going to do physics, great. What's the community aspect of that? Is like, well, you're going to go help build a new bridge at the local park or something like that, which would just be fun to do. So that's a kind of look for things like that are, especially community service is a good one, because they have very different attitudes toward it. And so if you find a good fit for what you've done before, that could be a great way to connect specifically with the university.
Exactly. And I think, even for, maybe the environmentalism is a little bit niche as well, but even for interests that students might have, co-curricular activities that students might do that are a little bit more popular. I think that same principle of the academics and the major applies, where the way that one university approaches a sport, or the way that one university approaches chess club or whatever it might be, could be a little bit different to another university. So, start with your interests, start with the things that you you genuinely want to do and be engaged in when you arrive on campus, and then look at, well, what makes this particular approach unique at this university, and how does that fit in with the way that I view my activity and the way that I want to be involved, and maybe compare some different universities clubs to see what is the difference between them, if that helps. But you don't have to have this sort of unique activity in and of itself, but just look at how each university uniquely approaches that activity as well.
And again, I really encourage all of you to look for combinations. So you're interested in soccer, environmental science, and paleontology. Great. Very few schools are going to be able to meet that. If you have those multiple interests, then you're on a really good, solid path with that. So encourage you to, we're near the end of I think what we wanted to cover. So if you have any questions specific to universities that you're looking at, please put them in. And I'll just kind of summarize then. Huge advice is, or I guess the headline is, find something about the college that's unique to the college and uniquely matched to your proven interests, right? Remember the proof part, that's important. And so then start with your major, look at your minors, look at the academics. If that doesn't work well, then combine it with, maybe look at the faculty, look at the kind of research that you've done, especially if you've done research that led you to be interested in that. Third would be connected to your passion or some other things that you want to study, or in the cases where it's relevant, where the location uniquely supports especially some academic interest, like Michigan. If you're, and it happens a lot, doing journalism in New York City, yeah, that's where all the journalism is, and going there to study journalism makes a lot of sense, because you get people that just come and lectures that are part of the national media. And then look at other interests, other things that the university is proud of, such as their approach to community service, or in Brown's case, their open curriculum, and see how you could uniquely use that, or how that matches something that you've done in your past that would work well. Rachel, anything
I think,
on that?
Yeah, just one, in terms of, again, very general sort of advice, a reminder to really look at that prompt. Think about, what is it explicitly asking me? Make sure that you're directly answering that question. So be careful. Sometimes the why us question will ask just literally that, why us? And it can encompass literally every reason that you want to attend that university. Other times it might be a little bit more academically focused, or it might be a little bit more focused on the community. But so just pay attention to that prompt to make sure that you are, responding in the same way that they are asking the question. So if it's a question that's focused on academics, then maybe you can connect like a co-curricular activity if it is academically oriented, but then you wouldn't want that to be the focus of your essay. You want the academics to be the focus. And then on the other hand, if it asks, how will you engage in our community, then you wouldn't want to only talk about academics, because that is, you're missing a piece of that answer. So just make sure that you're really carefully reading that prompt and answering in kind. And I think sort of a final message as well is that we did talk a little bit about location of universities. Like New York is a really common example, because there's a ton of universities in and around New York City, and I think a lot of those universities, they're not opposed to you mentioning the city, but they want you to do so with a grain of salt, basically, and not make that the focus of your essay rather than the university itself. So be careful of that. And I think there's also the culture aspect of a university that we talked about a little bit, in terms of if they focus on public service and so on. My final little advice on that is that you can look at things like the university's values or their mission statement, which is usually somewhere on their website, and that can give you an idea as well in terms of what kind of student they're looking to accept, and who they want to sort of put out into the world. And you can make sure that you agree with those values and that mission statement, and maybe choose examples that are sort of in line with that as well.
That sounds great. Well, I don't see any open questions. So we'll give it a minute, but otherwise, I think we're done.
Perfect. I guess I'll add one more thing. So much to say on this topic. Websites, that's mostly what we talked about today, but there's other ways that you can get this information as well. So you can definitely follow universities on social media. A lot of them have specific accounts for their admissions department. So on Instagram or on Facebook, they might do sort of like lives where they answer your questions, or they might have like a student perspective where you follow a student around for a couple of hours and see what their life is like. All of that, those are really valuable tools as well for figuring out what are those unique details about the university that apply to you as well. So, you stray off the website a little bit, as long as it's an official sort of account related to the university, or even speaking to alumni and asking them, what did you do on campus? Because that can reveal some things. You might have to double check that those things still exist depending on sort of how long ago that alum graduated, but that could be another way just to get that information. But as we've been kind of saying throughout, it's a lot of research, but it should be fun research, because it should get you excited that, okay, this is a university that I can definitely see myself at, and these are all the different things that I want to study and I want to do when I get there. And it will just make your why us essay and any other supplemental essays really so much easier to write.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. I see no more questions, so we will leave you right here. And if you think of something else, our emails are on the ESM website. Feel free to write, and we'll be happy to answer.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.